the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. Here we discuss all matters paganism, heathenism, witchcraft, history, and mythology. Leave a like, leave something nice in the comments, share this with everyone, and enjoy yourselves on this amazing episode of the Greyhorn Pagans podcast.
To the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. It has been a while since I've recorded something new, getting over a bit of a bug, so if I sound a little congested, that's why. But other than that, I am happy to be recording again, and especially with my guest today, David Og. Is that how
No, actually, it's a French name. It's pronounced Auger.
Okay. Oh, wow. French. Okay. Well, there I go. Just assuming that it's English. But David Auger. All right. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming on. For those not familiar with you or your work just yet, introduce yourself. What do you do? What are you about?
Okay. Well, Stang, thanks a lot for the opportunity to be here. I do appreciate that. I'm the author of a book called Man's Search for Sustainability. As background, I've had decades in the industry where I've had to help companies comply with environmental and sustainability requirements. And during those decades of doing just that, I've come to the understanding that very few people understand that the concept is normative in its presentation. So my effort has been more of as an environmental philosopher to try and explain to people the key aspect of understanding sustainability from that normative perspective, understanding it as more descriptive, more in the concept and the overarching idea of what is it about that we want to sustain, or why sustain anything at all, and bringing that to the table for those that are interested and hopefully those that want to learn about this very important concept that most of the world seems to be frustrated and arguing and continuing to fight about day in and day out.
Yeah, no, sustainability, it's important, of course, but it seems to be one of those, or has become really one of those corporate buzzwords, you know, oh, we're all about sustainability and for, you know, saving the planet and all of that, but nobody actually seems to really be able to explain how they go on and do that. I mean, it's a little more than just, you know, changing your plastic coffee cups to paper coffee cups. Mm-hmm. I mean, it helps, of course, but it's a drop in the ocean. Mm-hmm. So you also managed to narrow it down to two distinct animals, insects.
Yeah.
The honeybee and the desert locust, which
that's correct.
I find fascinating, like such a, how you managed to narrow down such a large, comprehensive, incomprehensive, maybe even topic to just those two. How do you do that? Because they're very distinctive creatures, and it's such a large topic. How do you explain that by, you know, using the honeybee or using the desert locust?
Right. Well, Stan, let me give you a little bit of background before we get to those two insects. Maybe that would be helpful.
Please.
Slightly after 9/11, 2001, I went at a West Point Society of Greater Houston, and we had a speaker at that session who was bringing to insight some of the differences that this upcoming conflict was going to place before Western societies. Expert in the Middle East and Afghanistan and Iraq, had decades in those environments, and he brought to this group of officers the understanding that the concept could be with two words of why this upcoming interaction was going to be such an issue for us in the West. And he says the two terms are, it's history. It's history. He says in the concept of a Western mindset, it's history means it's irrelevant. It has no playing on the day in and day out activity. We say, it's history, and we usually use that as a term of which we dismiss something as of need or a concern or of importance. He said in the Middle East, the concept of its history means the exact opposite. It's relevant. It does have a bearing on the decision we need to make today because of what's happened up to this particular point. That concept, that separation between its history in the West and its history in other parts and other societies around the world is, I thought, could be brought to the table best through these two insects. You see, we look at the world many times as just a bunch of raw materials that we're going to build and put things in place, and as we go in that particular way, we're not going to see the relevance of what's gone on behind us. In many ways, the conflicts that we had in the Middle East were a one-year war we fought 20 times over. Because we had such short-term objectives, there was no long-term understanding of the entire picture of what we were addressing. That can also best be explained by two figures. We have Plato, who believed that these two terms could be explained as mimesis and poiesis. Mimesis is meaning that history, what happened in the past, what comes to the forefront, is understood as perfect, particular past effort that was put there that we're trying to find our way to do again. That, for example, worked correctly, that we'd like to mimic in the environment, such as bee insects, those gator communities that have existed since time began. Those perhaps could give us the mimetic understanding of a historical point of view, as opposed to poiesis, which is, well, who cares what we got in the past, let's just make it up as we go along. That contrast is what I was trying to put on the table with these two insect communities. They diverge because many times honeybees are seen as the very example of a proper society, a proper way in which we can handle what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. In states, we have state flags that have the honeybee right there in the center of the flag as a society of what we want to do. They've got honeybees, even though Apis mellifera is from Europe and then into Africa, as the state insect. It's not even from these states. It was transported, it was imported into these areas. In contrast, you have another insect, the desert locust. If there's one thing to most likely destroy an entire community, it'll be a desert on your border. It will consume everything in sight, and it won't stop until everything is gone. And then it'll die. That example is usually the most hated of, I guess, environmental pictures, at least in our eyes. But there's benefits also to be gained from both of these. Each one has an instinctual desire to be a sustainable community. And we can learn something from both, and we can also learn what not to do from both as well. An idea. These stories brought forth through the life of these two insect communities could help us better understand, the greater picture of what we might want to sustain and what we might not want to sustain.
Okay, like that. Oh, those are very good analogies, because, the whole desert thing, or desert or wasteland, that's, you see that a lot as the, what would be like the ultimate bad ending, like Mad Max kind of a wasteland. And the desert locust, I mean, you see that in a lot of stories, religious stories, even, it plays a main part in the plagues from the Bible. It was the locust plague that destroyed all the crops, causing famine and all. And the honeybee. I mean, my wife absolutely loves bees and honeybees, so she tells me a lot about it. But they work together in the hive to build it up,
right,
of course, and to create and work together. Well, the locust is just about destroying. Oh yeah, that's a very good analogy, actually.
Don't take it that the desert locust doesn't work together, because they do work together. I mean, the marauding band of this insect coming forward and working its way, first from a nymph to a flying insect, will continually move forward, usually downwind or downhill, if you would, devouring whatever it has in its path. But it does move in a particular uniform direction in its efforts. That's one of the things that they both have. They work together. One without a king and one with a definite queen. The situation with the locust is, many people say, why are they moving together when we can't find a uniform leader of this whole mass? In contrast, the honeybee has, and her pheromones, her desires, her authority over that hive seems to be the very structure or the very person that gives the she's the mother of the entire 30 to 50,000 bees that are within that. So you learn something from both of them as they go forward. Some people have said, what could be the benefit of a locust? I mean, tell me one thing that we could take from the locust that could be beneficial to us if we're supposed to gain some benefit from these two communities. And many times people would say, well, there can't think with the locust. But I'd like to bring that, or at least bring that to the table, because there is something. In a hive can sometimes destroy it. There can be stress from other insects on the outside of a beehive, varroa mites, there's moths, there's beetles. There's also temperature changes that have an impact on that particular society continuing into the future. So as a beekeeper, and I am a beekeeper, I find myself many times having to protect that hive from these external stressors so that it can be a healthy hive and continue from one season into the next. In contrast, stress is actually to the benefit of the desert locust. See, a locust actually has a phase change. Locusts are grasshoppers, but not all grasshoppers are locusts. There's actually a change. There's about 10 or so different species of a grasshopper that can change because of stressors into a locust. That's in the desert locust that I've written this book about. Has one of the strongest tendencies to transform. It goes from its color of a green to a yellow with black spots. It changes its body formation, so it's actually stronger. Its brain size increases by 30%. Can you imagine your brain under stress not going to the lower brain, whereas humans, many times we act, we're irrational.
Yeah, just on impulse.
Yeah, on impulse. Well, you've got a locust whose brain is now 30% larger because of the stress it's gone through. These are external environmental factors forcing it to act in a different fashion. Instead of flying at night, it flies during the day. Instead of being separate, it's gregarious. It finds itself joining with other locusts so that it can move forward in a uniform fashion. A locust is a wonderful treat for most animals out there. Birds love it. Lizards love it. There's a lot of insects that find locust, because of its high protein content, to be a lot more like shrimp. If they can get at it, they can eat it and go about their day. Well, what will happen is the locust will change its diet slightly. It'll start to eat poisonous plants. So the birds that all of a sudden start to eat this yellow, what looked like a grasshopper, find themselves eating poison and dying. They start to move forward in such large numbers that, yes, they are something to be eaten by other insects, but because of this, they have that much more of a marauding impact upon that environment that they're trying to take over. And now you say, well, what are we supposed to learn as humans from something like that? Well, you have to look at how does that society continue to sustain. From a human standpoint, we don't want it to. but as a society itself, it's moving forward. And it's continually moving downhill. It's continually moving toward greater opportunities to eat. The end result of what happens with the locust, but at least their efforts to get there is something we can learn from. Stress is not always such a bad thing in human society. It strengthens us. It can actually help us to make decisions that we are not willing to make when we're more comfortable, when we're at ease. And that's something you can take from a desert locust as a benefit we can learn from.
That's fascinating, really. I mean, under great stress, we are, well, I mean, at least humans are known to make very impulsive decisions, but indeed, on the other hand, when the stress is at its highest, it's also, which may sound very contradictory, but it's when we need to think clearly, because, you know, that's when it matters. That's when it matters.
Yeah, it does. And there are things, drawbacks. You know, when you try and contrast us, we have a mob mentality as humans. When we get past a certain number, the decision made by humanity in a group becomes not more intelligent, but less. There's something called the Dunbar number. I kind of put that in the book, and it's something some people are familiar with. It's the fact that the relationships in humanity seem to be about 150 or less. You know, we seem to be able to comprehend and work with other when we're at a group of about that size or less. When we get above 150, 200, this mob mentality, this ability to make decisions starts to get hampered. That's not the case for desert locusts nor for honeybees. They seem to have an instinctual ability to manage that. Can we learn from it? Well, we can learn from it, but we can also guard ourselves from thinking that this is a particular dynamic that we can thing with missions within desert locust. It's called wind, or searching for the center. They get to what's called the instar. These are phases of growth. The fifth instar is the point when they have wings. And there is a continual searching for low pressure. Low pressure means there's most likely going to be some type of rain. There's most likely going to be some type of opportunity for them to follow that and be in an environment where there is an excessive amount of vegetation, which is what they're looking for to eat. They're searching for this. There's a group within there that are continually flying toward and searching for a center from which to then take the advantage in the right direction that will help them as a society go forward. An unusual one, because it's not being directed by a queen, it's not being directed by a king. There's no single structural leader within this group. It's a searching for the most beneficial opportunity upon which to then capitalize and move forward. So anyway, I mean, from decision making, you can learn something from that. You can learn something from both the sustainability. For example, I can tell you the decision, and a key one that they have to make, is to take one hive and become two. You know, there has to be some decision making within that hive itself to say, yes, we have kind of maximized this particular community. Probably 60% of us, let's go to a branch, let's spend a couple days, decide where we need to go, and then fly off as a group, you know, 20 to 30,000 of them, to a new home. Most people are pretty frightened by the fact that you've got a tree branch filled with 10,000 bees hanging in your garden out there, and that's usually when I get called, because people are afraid of that swarming tendency. That's to bring to the table the fact that they need to do this as a society to continue forward. We'll go with this group, mostly the older bees, hang onto that tree branch, and then in that ball they will have a decision-making process as to their new home. On the outside of that ball of bees, there is a debate taking place. Certain forager bees, now scout bees, are looking for new homes. They're looking for 15 feet in the air. They're looking for something that has a small opening that's southern facing. They're looking for a certain dry community so they don't get washed away. They'd like to have it have been occupied by bees in the past so that as they move in, they'll have perhaps some structural aspect of the place. Anyway, they're going out and they're looking at these places, and as they come back, they'll do a dance, communication dance, where they're attempting to tell the other bees the benefit of what they've found. And the intensity of which their dance takes place is actually their of why their decision's better than anybody else. That decision then eventually finds one of them convincing the other, convincing the entire group, and then within about 48 hours or so, the hive in total will take off. That use of a quorum, that use of listening to the other ones that are available, and then taking that and making that decision, is an example that we could use as well. So what is what's called leakage of information. You know, as humans, when we think that we got just exactly the right answer to help make this planet more sustainable, we will die on that hill. We will think, oh, that's it, it's got to be this way, and all of a sudden the conflicts become almost immeasurable. Bees don't do that. They leak information. They have an intensity about their decision being better than somebody else, but what happens is the intensity will actually die off as their message is either accepted or rejected by the remainder of the hive. Humans learn about that. Maybe we don't need to always die on the hill for our particular perspective. Maybe we can say, yeah, I believe mine's stronger, but as a group we've decided else, otherwise we'll go off in that direction. Something to be learned from them in their decision-making process.
Yeah, it seems that is, at least if we're in the sustainability discussion, it's one of the roadblocks that everyone thinks they're right, that every other group thinks they have the right solution, and they all want to implement it, and they may be good solutions, and I'm sure it's been thought over well, but it's also not just thought over but also fought over. Like, no, my idea is better. No, my idea is better. But
yeah,
aren't we all working towards the same goal, and that is to save the planet, or at least preserve the bit that we have left, the livable parts? So why is there, if you can answer this, I'm not sure, but why is there so much infighting? Is that just the human ego not wanting to admit that, hey, their idea may be better, or their idea is good as well? Like, is it ego, is it pride, or is it just, I don't know, it seems just so many people have so many ideas and everyone thinks theirs is the best.
Right. Well, I'm dealing with what's called the paradox of the commons. The paradox of the commons. The idea is that, let's say we have a field, all of our communities here, and that field has got just the right grass for our cows to go out there and use. They all go out there and use it. Normally we can come back in and be fine. The paradox of the common is that if we all do that and nobody ever maintains that particular field, the fields, the resource available to us dries up. The paradox of the common is one of the reasons why there is such a structure, because we feel like, well, we've got a limited supply of, and then fill in the blank, and that particular frustration brings to the surface a conflict. In contrast to that is the paradox of the invisible hand. This is Adam Smith and The Wealth of Nations, written in 1777, 78, I think, is when the book was written. Anyway, he put on the table the idea that there is this invisible hand of the market that seems to solve this situation, this paradox of the commons, because there's going to be an improvement of it, there's going to be restrictions, there's going to be costs decided, and because of that, this invisible hand of the market's eventually going to find one way or the other. The problem is those two paradoxes seem to be in conflict with one another. Is it the paradox of the commons, that we are in such a way that we will consume all of the resources at our disposal? Probably best example is the desert locust. They're devouring everything until all of a sudden it says, well, there's nothing here left, and they all die. There's something of the paradox of the invisible hand, where somewhere behind us we're making decisions on we don't quite know we're even making those decisions. The honeybee, for example, has a limited amount of resources in its environment, and as some become available and some become less, they change the very dynamic of jobs within the hive, the type of honey they start to collect, the volume, in their preparation for a hard winter. They even kick out, and I haven't got to something like this part. There's going to be certain members of the hive that are not even allowed to get through the winter months because they've decided as a community to kick them out. As background, you're going to have 3 different types of insects in that. You're going to have the queen, she's unique. You're going to have drones, those are all females. I'm sorry, you're going to have workers that are all females. You have drones that are all males. Males, their entire position is to procreate. The honey bee does not need a drone during the winter months. So when you go into fall, into winter, it will exclude, kick out, and not allowed to remain in the hive the drone population, which is only 0.1% of the entire hive, but it will take them out. Anyway, there's an invisible hand that appears to be giving that dynamic in that environment. Perhaps I'm stretching the analogy somewhat, but as you can see, those 2 paradoxes and the understanding that those 2 paradoxes can only be solved by, somehow putting an iron around that field that all these cows are in the paradox of the common, or the other side that, we have just let the invisible hand, knowing that it's invisible, work its magic.
Yeah, because it does seem, if if you just look at what or how it's being reported, that we're going the way of the desert locust. Unfortunately, that we're taking, mostly for profit, for big profit. Money is always a factor, unfortunately. So is there a way that we can turn that around, or is it just which is the case with many industries, or at least what I've learned over the years, there's just too much money to be made, or it costs too much money to change certain things, because it's a very basic example that I gave, of course, the switching from plastic cups to paper cups. But if you just do that for one office building with a couple thousand people working there, that's a lot. That's a big investment already, which I can understand that it's gonna eat into the profits, and maybe we'll just find another way to do it. So it seems that we want a solution, but it doesn't need to cost anything, or preferably as very little as possible. Like, is that such a big problem, or is that something that we just tell ourselves?
When we put a cost on it, I think that like you just mentioned, it becomes a problem, and that'd be the reason why such a conflict in trying to come up with a material solution to this that I wrote was Man's Search for Sustainability. That's a name that you may or may not be familiar with. There's a gentleman named Viktor Frankl who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. Now, Viktor Frankl, are you familiar with him at all?
No, can't say I am. I will have to look into his work.
Okay, well then, let me tell you, Viktor Frankl was an Austrian neurologist and psychologist. He founded a field of psychology called logotherapy, which has been dubbed like the third Viennese school of psychology. There's Freud, who says things are based upon our drive for sexual pleasure. There's Adler, who says our desires in this life are based upon a grasping for power. Logotherapy, was developed by Frankl, says that our drive is to find purpose. Our drive is to find why are we here, to deal with what's called the existential vacuum out there for purpose. Now, Frankl spent a total of 3 years in 4 camps during World War II, Nazi concentration camps. At Auschwitz, Kaufering, and Turkheim. Those are the 4 camps he was in. He lost his father in the Terezin ghetto, and his mother were both killed at Auschwitz, his Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, and his sister Stella, she was able to escape to Austria. But during the time that he was in these camps, he found coming to the surface the very reason of why. He uses in his book a quote from Nietzsche that says, "A man with a why can handle almost any how." A man with a why to move forward, to make a decision, to continue to say, I want one more day of life, of breath on this planet. Because everybody around me, every single actor he's at that concentration camp, is to either use him for some effort of production or to kill him. And eventually when he has absolutely no strength left, then he either dies because he's killed himself, or he dies because of total exhaustion. And that's what he found. He found out that there were certain people in those camps that had a desire to see one more day. The idea of logotherapy is they did so for three reasons. The reason is they wanted to see one more day is because they had something they wanted to do outside of the environment that they were in. There was some great activity, some great mode of purpose. The second one was they had someone to see. You know, had their wives or their children in other concentration camps, and they needed to get through this experience themselves because outside those fences was someone they loved, they needed to be with before this life ended. And the third part, which he spends a lot of his time in logotherapy, is the question about purpose. You know, that's why the book, Man's Search for Meaning. There had to be some meaning or purpose in this existence that would say death have something bigger than just here and now. Pretty much where the rub, the same thing with sustainability as I see, and that's why the parallel is in here, is that when you're trying to say why or how do we sustain this, you need to come back to why sustain anything. You know, why sustain our community, and why this man, why sustain his life? I mean, if this entire apparatus was put together for his death, well, just surrender and die. But for some reason, he would continue to push day in and day out until at the very end he found himself, he was, of course, obviously one of the survivors because he wrote this book, but he was able to then the table what he had learned, and that was that the drive is not sex, it's not power, it's purpose. Man continues on to the next day, not because he wants more sex or he wants more opportunities to suppress or whatever, but to find out why this life is even here.
I mean, that is a question that we all struggle with. That you know, we are all really asking ourselves, like, why is life really? And yeah, I mean, I can see that within the sustainability discussion. Like, it's a lot, or well, maybe too much even, about the how and not, you know, the why, or the why is just oversimplified. Why sustainability? Well, you know, because we've got to save the planet. Yeah, okay, we get that. That's understandable. It's necessary, sure. But I think we ought to really narrow that down, like you said, you know, to, you know, communities or to yourself, or like, okay, why do I want to be sustainable? You know, have your own personal goals, and I think perhaps that way it would also be a lot easier to achieve. I mean, that always reminds me of the wisdoms of my late grandmother. She always used to tell me, you know, if you want to better the world, start by bettering yourself. And I think, you know, it's a very, you know, basic wisdom, of course, but we can apply that to so many things.
Yes.
And I think the sustainability discussion is definitely one of those things. You know, start small. Like, okay, we want to save the world. Yeah, but like, are we gonna just, you know, go on and on and on and on until we find a way to, like, save it all at once? Or are we gonna go, you know, step by step, day by day, community by community, household by household?
Right.
And I think that may be one of the solutions, actually, because we're always looking at the big picture, and then we're gonna try this, we're gonna try that, and just hoping that it'll do something on a larger scale. Always thinking big.
Right.
If we'll just it's also a common thing, instead of plastic straws wrapped in paper, we'll do paper straws wrapped in plastic, because plastic is a big problem. Yeah, it is, but I mean, that problem also has many other factors, and it's not those plastic straws that are are the issue. It's I believe mostly even like fishing nets, from the bigger fishing trawlers that are just it can't be fixed anymore, or it's it's overused, out of date. Just leave it be. Mother Nature will find a way to get rid of it. So always, I mean, the intention is good, of course, because especially if you live in the bigger cities, those are the things that you see floating around, but they're so minute that I don't think those things are really as helping as much as as the people who implemented those ideas think they will, or want them to do.
Right.
I mean, yeah, think big, but start locally.
Right. Yeah, start locally. Perhaps where Frankl brought to the surface in concentration camps, that each individual had to make the choice themselves whether to live one more day, whether their purpose and their purpose found usually was kindness, the exercise of that. In the book, I have this one story about Father Kobe, who at the time that he was in Auschwitz, there was, and it's a very fascinating story, but at the time that the concentration camp was early on, it was like 42, 43, there were, if you had anybody attempt to escape and did so, then there would be a particular barracks, to the point that 10 to 15 of them would be placed in and to just die from not eating or drinking. It was an underground cell, and individuals who were chosen be placed because, yes, one prisoner had been able to escape from Auschwitz, and they were going to punish these in return. The suffering, those individuals that were chosen at that time stepped forward and says, I would like to take the place of this prisoner in his traveling into that hole and dying. The rest of the camp saw he went in there and he did just that. He died in the place of that other individual. And that one little act kept all the way through, Viktor Frankl, who arrived about a year after the death of that situation, brought to the table that one act, that one single situation, was almost a seed of hope for so many of the other ones, to say, maybe there is a larger purpose than just mine. Maybe there's a larger purpose that this Father Kobe, was able to demonstrate to us, starting with that one purpose. And then those other people decided themselves to sustain their life, until at the end of it, many of them, of course, were killed through the ovens and the other interaction that took place there. But that individual sustained their life.
That's beautiful, and that's also such a sign of bravery as well, and just love for your fellow human. In the end, we're all humans. I mean, we're all human beings. We all have to take care of each other, and self-sacrifice. I usually come at things from a more spiritual, religious aspects, but self-sacrifice is just one of the greatest virtues, really, and especially if it gives the other people hope, if it gives them meaning to continue on. That is it's so important, such a beautiful thing, and maybe something that we should do more of, that we should, because it also comes down to the whole profit thing. Nobody is willing to, at least from the decision makers, at least, nobody's really too willing to sacrifice something of themselves. It's always someone else. It's always, you know, the larger populace that has to sacrifice something. And I mean, maybe we can learn something from the Father. Maybe we can look at examples of people who are willing to set the right example, who are willing to show us how we should do it. I see that constantly, like you know, all those celebrities, for example, who are you know, have become very political and are like, oh, we need to save the climate or whatever, but then like Kim Kardashian, for example, taking her private jet to Paris just for one cake that she loves so incredibly much. So, you know, LA to Paris just to pick up a cake. But, you know, we gotta think of the environment. It seems like there's a lot of talk about, you know, sustainability and needing to save it, but really very little of the people who demand that you know, that we drive electric, that we, you know, drink out of paper cups. Very little of them are willing to set the right example, or at least set the right example in private. You know, when the cameras are on them, they're all about it, and, you know, they'll drink the they'll drink the filtered water, you know, like Bill Gates, for example. But I very much doubt that in his multi-million-dollar mansion that, you know, he has a lot of sustainable things going on. So that also seems to be, you know, a big thing. We want to be sustainable. We want to, you know, save the planet. Of course we do. I mean, we only have one, so let's take care of it.
Right.
But we're being told by people how to do it, while they themselves don't really show us how to do it. They just tell us, hey, this is gonna change. We're gonna do this from now on. Okay? And how do we do that? How do we make the switch? Is the switch really gonna be that good? We say it's good, so therefore it's good. Go and do it.
Right.
It's a lot of them, you know, a lot of you guys, and very little. Let's actually show them how we should do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's in many reasons for the book too, because the how we're going to do it, the how seems to be where we get the most frustrated, where perhaps philosophically we need to back up and go to the why do it at all. You know, the why aspect brings it back to the very initial question. The analogy that Viktor Frankl had of saying he was in a concentration camp. The walls are right there. His for the next 24 hours was pretty much surrounding the community wanted him to die. But it was desire, his attitude to take it one more step. And that why is there's a purpose, or there's something. In his case, he wanted to write what he was learning about logotherapy, that purpose does seem to be the reason why people are still alive and going forward. And that why in sustainability is philosophical. And many times we don't want to get into that arena because we say, oh, it's this for you and that for me, and we'll agree. And that might be the case. But we still have to ask the question and teach our society and the nation, ask that question first. Ask it before you start to arm wrestle each other into the how. Because the how will drive you absolutely nuts, because you haven't even started the why question. And that's Nietzsche's quote, you know, a man with a why can handle almost any how.
Yeah, I've seen that quote before. I mean, Nietzsche is, of course, you know, as a philosopher, he's a little more popular, a little more well known. A lot of his work is getting brought back up in these days. And yeah, it is the how question that is driving everybody, you know, nuts, because we can come at it from so many different directions, and so many different things can be done. We can do 1,001 things, but we only think of the end goal, like how are we gonna do it, you know, to sustain, not, you know, why are we gonna do it, why is this good, why should we do it that that way? Why should we like for example, I know that hemp is very, very sustainable. It grows, you can, what is it, I believe, like harvest it 5 times a year. A lot of things can be made of it, from jeans to rope to even bricks, hemp bricks. Very light, very durable, but they keep a lot of the warmth in, so you can even use it in construction. But for some reason we're not thinking of it, or we're making a lot of decisions, like for example, like I said, going electric, with the automobile. Yeah, then the car itself won't have any emissions, but the way we make the batteries is not sustainable whatsoever. Like those cobalt mines, they are dirty as can be. So we think we fixed one thing, like, oh, now the cars, they won't have those dirty exhaust fumes anymore. Okay, good. But by doing that, we created a whole other problem.
Yeah. There are unintended consequences to so many hows, especially when we jump on a house so quickly. I mean, one that I kind of bring to the table is all of the chlorofluorocarbons, the CFCs, that were all the rage back in the 1930s and 40s, but found out in the 1970s and 80s there's an ozone hole developing in certain portions of our planet, where the ozone of the troposphere is resulting in cancer on portions of our planet. And therefore we need to find, and we've all become so comfortable with refrigerants, we need to find a substitute that will somehow allow us to maintain a very lives, but not destroy the planet in the interim. Those things sometimes frustrate, because it's a how to get better comfort, but not having thought through the unintended consequences of the system. For example, my grandfather was a gold miner in Breckenridge, Colorado. Excuse me, I need to get something to drink here. Just a second. Sorry about that. But what I was saying is that there was a gold miner back in the 1900 Colorado, and Breckenridge was being advertised then and previously as you need to go as a mining town, because it had, I think it was at that time, 7 to 15 saloons in that area. And as I was reading this article saying, why is the number of saloons of this community being sustainable? Just was puzzling. Why that particular factor? And as I looked further into researching this, I realized that the tax base most dependable were the saloons. You could get at that time $300, which was quite a lot, from every saloon, whether it be a tent on 4 or 5 pallets, every 6 months or every single year. So the number of saloons to an investment company would indicate that that was a sustainable mining town, because it had a tax base that would pay for the police, it would pay for maybe the upgrade of the roads, it would pay for electricity that was eventually going to be brought into that thing. That tax base was linked to the saloons, which was linked to this particular mining town being more sustainable than others. That seemed awfully backwards. And it seemed awfully backwards also in the long term, that sustainable measure that you want to keep on in the future. Because if 5 to 7 to 10 saloons are good, well then 20 to 50 to 100 saloons are even better. Well, saloons, mining town, long-term growth, we're kind of backwards here into that. And we've missed the unintended consequences of the entire picture.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's you see that now too, but with the larger stores, for example, and mostly like the bigger brand stores, the bigger and more brand stores there are in a certain town, the better it is to live there. If you have a Nike store and some Walmart or any of those bigger stores, that means that it's a good city, a good town to live in, because you have all that you need. Not thinking about what that does to to local economy bijvoorbeeld, or local ecology. Because if you have a mega Walmart, needs a parking lot, which is not the best for the environment. I mean, I don't know who that was, more from my parents' time, but they paved Paradise and put up a parking lot. I mean, that's basically what we did. We put concrete and tar and all of that on everything for comfort, for ease of use, not thinking about what it does. And it seems that every summer we have a new record heat wave, but also every summer, every year, more nature disappears from the cities, more trees are being cut down. So the problem seems to be growing bigger, and we're all yelling the loudest, oh, we need to do something about it. Well, how about we, for starters, stop ruining nature? How about we find, how about we just stop ever expanding cities? Like, we don't need an 8-9 lane highway, for example. You can make the cars electric all you want, but an 8-9 lane highway, it's still not going to be good for for the environment, for the planet. So yeah, that's a very good analogy, actually, with the saloons.
Yeah.
And I understand it from a economic standpoint. It's it makes sense, because the saloon, and people have a place to eat, to relax, to drink, to to sleep, even perhaps. So yeah, of course, then more people are gonna go there, which means that it's a more more and better welfaring city. But that's not sustainable. And yeah, as you said, like that, if 7 to 10 saloons are great, then 100, hey, that's even better, because it's more money coming in. It's more money that we can fund these sustainable projects with, while at the same time ruining the sustainability with all those saloons, with all those cafes, with the larger stores.
Right.
So it's a lot of, it's very backwards indeed.
Yeah.
And we seem to have the right intentions, but to go about it all wrong, or all backwards.
Yeah.
So I think, as you mentioned, that we should really stop looking at the how, because that's that only causes infighting and money streams going in all the wrong directions. Unfortunately, a lot of charlatans as well, because where there's big money, you'll find charlatans. And we need to start looking at the why, and start looking smaller at our own communities. I mean, that's what we did. It's how we have survived for up until now, really.
Right.
Saving our communities, keeping our communities strong, keeping our communities healthy. And because they're strong, because they're healthy, we can expand. Like the beehive example that you gave. Like, oh, it's it's a healthy hive, maybe a bit too much. Let's expand. Let's make another hive with a group of bees, or a group of people, if we're talking about our communities.
Right.
So yeah, I think those are some really good examples. And if only the people in charge would actually listen to us, not just
philosophical question to the why is, each one of us, like you mentioned, needs to make that decision ourselves. The contrast between the two is that the strength many times of the desert locust was the fact that there wasn't someone in charge. Going forward was an individual decision, not a collision. And that's why we many times want the beehive as our example of that's the society that should work. But there's things to be gained when we individually take upon ourselves to go forward in this regard.
Yeah, does seem to be a thing as well. And I, from as a European looking to the United States, especially, it's always, we're a lot of times waiting for someone else to lead them, waiting for someone else to tell them what to do, to tell them in what direction to go to, and not making those decisions for themselves. Or maybe they've become so used to other people making the decisions for them that they have really stopped thinking for themselves, because everyone else is already making the decisions. The people in power all are making the decisions, so I guess we'll just sit back and do whatever they tell us to do.
I don't want to leave it on a negative note. I think that one of the benefits from looking at sustainability, as we do get to the why question, we each individually make those decisions best ourselves. And that's the benefit here, because there is a lot of wringing of our hands and saying it's someone else's issue. No, it's all of our issues. We need to sustain our own family, our own community, the circle of people we have as friends, and to work that forward. There's so much gained from the strength of that bond there, expecting someone else to do it elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. That is the right example. We're about an hour in. Is there anything else that you wish to discuss?
No, I mean, if anybody wants to read the book that I've written, I've got a website, davidaugerbooks.com. And when we open it up, there'll be a splash screen that has a whole page summary you could get to kind of explain the differences these two communities provide. Both are instinctually driven, bees and locusts. We are not. So you can gain some insight from seeing what they do based upon the existence of existing, where we have to make that decision ourselves. And that's pretty much what I'd like to end on. We need to find the why of it all. Why of we go to that how. Some people might not want that, but I think it's imperative for us to step forward in this conversation intelligently.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Well, David, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. This is not something that I usually discuss, but it is very important. I think your analogies are spot on. So stop looking at the how, start looking at the why.
Thank you, Stan.
I will, of course, make sure that's at least the link to your book is up in the description box down below, so that people may find it, so that they may read all about it. Everyone else watching, for everyone else listening, thank you very much. It's always great having an audience. If you want to find out more what we do on the podcast, if you want to find out more what we do with the tribe of the Greyhorn Pagans, simply go to our website, www.greyhornpagans.com. For now, leave a like, leave something nice in the comments, share this with everyone, because this is a lesson that we all should learn. And yeah, for now, I want to thank you all. Until next time, bye bye.
This was yet another amazing episode of the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. We thank you all for watching. We thank you all for listening. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you will be notified whenever we upload something new. Support us on Patreon for early access and for everything else that we do with the tribe, for everything else that we do with the podcast. Find us on www.greyhornpagans.com. For now, we thank you.